Have you ever looked at a friend, or maybe even yourself, and just wondered, why did they stay in a relationship that was so clearly bad for them? It's a really painful, really confusing question. Well, today, we're going to dig into the psychology behind it all. We'll look at the manipulator's playbook and the powerful, almost invisible bonds they create.
Right, so let's just get straight to the heart of it. From the outside, it makes no sense at all. But the answer isn't about someone being weak or not smart enough. It's about a really sophisticated and often hidden psychological game. And to understand that game, you first have to understand the person who's pulling all the strings.
So, let's start with the architect of this whole dynamic. And this is where it gets really unsettling, because their secret weapon is actually a skill that most of us really admire.
Yeah, you heard that right. Normally, we think of emotional intelligence, EI, as a great thing. It's about understanding your own emotions and being able to read others. It's supposed to be about empathy, connection. But what if that exact same skill could be twisted and used as a weapon? That's what some researchers are now calling dark intelligence. So this is the core idea from a study in the journal Personality and Individual Differences. Dark intelligence isn't a lack of social skill, it's the weaponization of it. It's having the ability to see, understand, and even manage emotions. But not for building genuine connections. No, it's for pure exploitation.
So, who are the people most likely to have this dark intelligence? Well, the research points us towards a very specific group of personality types known as the dark triad.
These are three distinct, but often overlapping traits. First up, you've got narcissism, which is all about that grandiosity and a deep lack of empathy. Then there's Machiavellianism, the cold, calculating strategist who sees people as just pawns on a chessboard. And finally, psychopathy, which is marked by a really chilling lack of guilt or remorse. They're different for sure, but they all share one dangerous common ground. They are more than willing to exploit anyone to get what they want. Now this table is fascinating because it shows us this really critical imbalance. Look over at the column for expressivity and control, especially for narcissism and psychopathy. See? They're actually skilled at performing emotions. They can be charming. They can seem totally in control. They can be incredibly convincing. But then, look over at the sensitivity and empathy column. It's negative or non-existent right across the board. That is the core of dark intelligence. They can put on a convincing show, but they don't have the genuine empathy to back it up. That imbalance, that's their secret weapon.
And that brings us to the other person in this equation. Because when you're with someone who is so good at managing emotion but has no real empathy, it creates this incredibly disorienting, confusing experience. And it forges a powerful connection that isn't built on love. It's built on trauma.
So, how in the world does this dynamic create such an intense attachment? Look, this has nothing to do with healthy love or normal loyalty. It's something way more complex and, frankly, more dangerous. It's a phenomenon that addiction expert Patrick Carnes actually named the betrayal bond.
Carnes basically defines this as a kind of traumatic bonding. Just think about that for a second. An intense bond is formed precisely when the person who is supposed to be your safe harbor becomes the source of your danger. The really crucial thing to get here is that the bond isn't formed in spite of the abuse. In a really twisted way, it's forged because of it.
This quote from Carnes' work just hits the nail on the head. It really does feel like an addiction. There's this obsessive focus on the person hurting you, a compulsion to keep going back even when you know it's going to hurt, and this desperate need for approval from someone who is just never going to truly give it.
Okay, so this is where it all clicks into place. We have to understand how the manipulator's dark intelligence directly creates the other person's betrayal bond. You see, they're two sides of the very same, very toxic coin.
This comparison here just lays it all out plain and simple. The manipulator, with their skill at pulling all the right emotional strings, creates a kind of psychological prison for the other person. Their ability to perform emotion builds that intense, confusing loyalty, while their total lack of real empathy makes sure the cage stays locked tight. One person's skill is literally what forges the other person's chains.
And if you want the hard data, here it is. This graph from the study might look a little complex, but the takeaway is absolutely staggering. Down at the bottom, you have emotional control, from low to high. And on the side, you've got emotional manipulation. Now, I want you to just focus on that top solid line. That represents people who are high in psychopathy. Do you see how it just shoots straight up? What that means is the more emotional control they have, the more they manipulate other people.
Their self-control isn't a virtue, it's the very weapon they use to create that betrayal bond.
You know, even when someone finally manages to break free, the story doesn't just end there. The experience of a betrayal bond leaves these deep psychological scars that can haunt a person for years to come.
Patrick Carnes points out several painful ways this trauma shows up long after the relationship is over. There's trauma repetition. That's where people unconsciously find themselves in the same kind of harmful situation over and over again. There's trauma shame, that crushing, deep-seated feeling that somehow it was all your fault. And then you have the survival tactics, like trauma blocking, using things to just numb the pain, and trauma splitting, where the mind literally starts to disconnect from reality just to cope with it all.
So why does all of this matter so much? Because you can't fight an enemy you can't see. And once you can recognize the mechanics of dark intelligence, once you can name the betrayal bond, it demystifies the whole experience. It allows you to shift the story from what's wrong with me to what happened to me. And let me tell you, that is an incredibly powerful, absolutely crucial first step.
Which, of course, leads us with one final thought. Naming the problem, that's the beginning of taking your power back. But what comes next? What does the path forward look like for someone who's ready to break those chains for good? Well, that's the journey from victim to survivor and eventually to thriver.